Hey everyone, Sam here. I just wanted to say that we lost the audio from this podcast, but we're still going to publish it with the backup audio from the cameras because we thought it was a really good conversation. So apologies about the audio quality, but if you can get used to it, I think there's some good content in here, so I hope you enjoy. And next week we'll be back to our normal level of quality. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Yo, yo, yo.
We're back.
We're back. Been a while.
Yeah, about a month.
Man, it's still reverby in here. Gotta fix that.
Where are the panels?
You should have been on that, man.
Yeah.
It's been a month since we podcasted.
I feels like it. It might actually happen.
That's crazy. Well, I went to Miami for React Miami, which was fun. First conference since COVID.
Nice.
Yeah, it was good to be back, man, for sure. Yeah. Met a bunch of people from Twitter, just the whole conference thing definitely energizes me. Definitely missed it. Hopefully there's a lot more conferences in our future.
Yeah, I mean, there's another React conference going on this week. So
couldn't swing that one, but
we got to make up for years of lost conference time.
I had a cool conversation with one of the guys who spoke. His name was Tejas, right? The guy that I'm
wasn't there.
Tejas. And he works at this company called Zada. It's a database company, but it's a React conference, a bunch of front-end developers sitting around and talking about front-end stuff, but he gave a talk about databases, which is always, interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm a front-end developer, where do I care about databases, but the whole pitch of their company, I needed to read more about it, but there were some interesting tidbits, the whole pitch of their company is think data, not databases, which is kind of nice. It's can you abstract away a database from a front-end developer? That's if you sent me that's one of those tests. You sent me a cold email that said something like that, yes, I'm interested. I never want to type in another Postgres URL string anywhere in config ever again. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But the little tidbit that I thought was neat was he was talking about ACID, and consistency versus stale data, and he was their whole thing is giving app developers, front-end developer, whatever, that doesn't really matter. It's more app developers, people who are just building features, right? And you give them a way in one line to say whether you want your data to be fast and stale or slower and consistent, because that's a fundamental constraint that all databases have. And, we've talked about Planet Scale is doing some interesting stuff, and then I think the first one was the guys from Twitter who were making what's the one with the database that's globally distributed. Isn't it
AWS?
No,
Aura. That's AWS.
Fauna. F, not A.
Close.
A, B, C, D, E, F. It's only 6 letters long. It's something my mom would say. It's only 6 letters long. Fauna was trying to do that, right? That's partly what they're doing. It's trying to go around that constraint. Because they were at Twitter and they were trying to scale up these this is always those things when people start talking about these databases. It's scaling database clusters always mess up teams. I've never been on any of the teams I've worked with who are starting up and they have SaaS, small projects or whatever, don't really run into that. But then I guess we did have that at some companies we worked at before. Yeah. So it is a real problem. It's just not something that I've ever been spearheading. I see much more problems with the base complexity. Anyways, that's besides the point. Point is, these companies are all trying to solve it. So when you hit levels of scale, you don't have to really think about this stuff. But you still have the speed of light as a constraint. And so it kind of comes up where even if you have the best technology ever, if you're building Twitter and someone likes to tweet in Japan, it's where is the origins database server that gets the new favorite, the new like? And if you put that in a database that's close to Japan, someone can write really quickly. But then if you're reading a tweet from California, then it's going to take a long time to read it. So there's a time between someone liking it in Japan and reading it in California.
Consistency. There's things that likes can be inconsistent because no one is.
Exactly.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that complain that their likes are.
Yeah, right.
But it shouldn't fundamentally break anything about Twitter, where maybe a stock price.
Exactly.
Inconsistency there could actually cost the company real money.
Exactly. So that's kind of was cool that their company is framing it, think data, not database. I guess it's you are thinking about which slices of your data need to be faster and can tolerate some level of being stale versus you just made a deposit to your bank account, and I would rather have it take an extra 3 or 5 seconds with a loading spinner to see what the current balance is. I never want to see a stale version of that. And basically, there's like a one-line way you can do that.
I was going to say, do you like configure that like a table level?
I don't know the details, but he was basically saying like, this is something that's a concern of an application developer. It should be accessible to them, whereas normally it's like a artifact of how your DevOps and database team is setting things up.
Yeah.
But that kind of ties your hands as a front-end developer, because you're like, I'm trying to build a UX that conforms to some whatever requirements or what my product managers tell me. And if I like a tweak, and it's stale or it takes a long time, I might not be able to build the UX that I need.
It's really cool that it actually forces you to think about what you're building, right? So like if you say like this thing should be fast and inconsistent, and that's like, okay. First of all, you can talk about that with anyone.
Right.
Like, where if you go up to a non-technical person and start talking about Cassandra, a big table,
right,
and they're just gonna like,
right,
right, fall asleep.
Right.
So yeah, and then also too,
you mentioned Cassandra too.
Also too, like, a lot of times, like, it's like when you have a database, let's just, what should I pick on today? So you're using
Mongo.
Mongo, not pick on Mongo too much. So you're using like Redis or whatever, and you're using it for whatever reason. It has like really, you chose it because it has these really good data structure transforms. You get guarantees about how you like push and pop from stacks, whatever. You chose that. That kind of gets lost in translation. So if someone else starts building a feature and they're like, oh, I have Redis, I'll just start using Redis. And like all of a sudden you become centered around using Redis or something. You know where I'm going with this? Where it's much better to be centered around fast and inconsistent.
Yes.
It's like
it's not about Redis or Postgres.
Right.
It's about
exactly
the requirements of the data.
And so like you just have these servers available, you're familiar with them, you end up writing data. It's like a bad game of telephone. Where am I using it? Oh, it's available. I used it in the last feature I built.
Right.
Or this actually forces you to think about it. Yeah. So I think that's really cool.
It's neat. The other cool thing about it is Postgres, which when I was learning, the first time I was introduced to this idea of like globally replicated databases was with the DynamoDB talk from Amazon. And that guy who headed the project was talking about how it's important to use a document store that's not like Postgres because you need to be able to partition your database in order to replicate it so that if we're working in a Google Doc, we can put that near us and it doesn't have to be like the system doesn't have to worry about replicating that to Japan because we're the ones who access it, we're the ones who use it.
We're not in Japan.
Exactly. And so a Google Doc has like text, it has comments, it has all these things. If these were all in different Postgres tables, you would need all the tables near us. But if it's in a tree structure, you can literally take that part and have all the data and move it in different places around the world. So he was saying like there's an important educational aspect to educating developers on how to restructure their data. Like it's almost like a leaky abstraction, but it's important. He's explaining how Amazon worked basically and how they made Amazon.com fast. And this was like an important thing. He was like basically with how networks and compute and like processing power was advancing, like the Higgs law stuff and all that. He was like, this is where things are going because X is getting cheaper and Y is more expensive, so we have to do this. I can't remember exactly the argument, but basically, like doing a join across a globally distributed database is like you're just kind of starting out dead in the water. And
the problem there is you have to replicate the whole database.
Yes, because you have to do arbitrary joins. So, whereas we built 99% of our apps with relational model where you have the ability to do arbitrary joins, and so we wouldn't want to give that up necessarily. And so this is pretty cool that it uses Postgres. It's just a cool thing because then it's one less thing to think about. So
for sure, and also too, like this goes back to kind of what you said with like the biggest problem you see is not like data, it's app complexity.
Yeah,
I kind of feel the same about like databases. Where it's like bad data modeling. It's not your document store scales around.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, pretty cool.
It reminds me of like a cache counter in Rails. That's like an example of it's like a performance thing because you can't you want to be able to read that next to the post or whatever for the comments count.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a great API. And once you learn how to use cache counters in Rails, you can treat it as if you're querying like the comments table and selecting count of star,
mm-hmm.
where post ID is this. And that's a great API, but it's also like, you do have to be aware of it as a developer. So it's cool to think about this as almost like a generalized version of that, which is like, I should be able to like select star from tweet likes where the tweet ID is this, but like, maybe I can just keep doing that if I tolerate some staleness, and then like, I don't worry about it. And like the technology takes care of like caching or just like rolling things up every second or whatever it is.
The inconsistency of the fast but inconsistency of the cache counter in Rails leaks.
Yes.
Because you now are like very aware of your select statement in your database column. So it'd be really cool if you just selected count.
Right.
Under the hood, run a cache counter.
Right. So anyways, that was fun. It was fun just having those kind of random conversations. Those are my favorite parts of the conference. I spent most of the time in the hallway track, met a bunch of people from the internet, which was fun. So did some karaoke, drank some margaritas. It was fun. Miami was a good time. It was a nice time in New York to be in Miami. It's like March, April in New York City is like the worst time to be here.
Yeah, it really is.
November, December is cold, but it's like romantic in New York City because it's like Saks Fifth Ave and Christmas and Thanksgiving. January, February, March, April, pretty rough. Spring comes really nice. Summer's amazing. Fall is like the best.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
fall is. Yeah.
So I like this South hot conference season in Q1, Q2. I'm on board with this.
What do they call it? Snowbirds?
Yeah, snowbirds. That's my goal. That's the point of life I'm at. I want to be a snowbird. Cool. Well, last time we were chatting, I think I had just worked on a video for like the React vocab, React jargon around React 18 and concurrent mode and stuff. And we were talking about the how use effects works in strict mode in React 18. So I think since our last podcast, React 18 has come out, or maybe it had just come out in our last podcast, but we hadn't really read this stuff. So we want to talk about that because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So there was a big change to strict mode in React 18 in that it double fires your effects. And there was a lot of like people tweeting that this was confusing, it was breaking their app. And we just wanted to chat about that. And it was like fun to read about it. So where should we start? I guess basically they have a nice explanation in the React 18 blog post. And they say, in React 17, the change from React 17 to 18 is that in 18, if you are rendering your app or component inside of React.strict mode, it'll double fire your mount effect. So
it'll unmount, and then mount again.
Right. So it mounts your component when you render a component. It creates your effects and your layout effects. Then it immediately simulates an unmount. That's what they say. It simulates an unmount. And so it destroys your layout effects and your effects, meaning it runs the cleanup function.
Exactly.
And then it simulates a remount using the previous state. So it actually could be like a different world in a sense, because like it's starting, the simulated remount is with whatever the version of the state is at that time. And I think it could have actually changed between those steps. But basically, it's like, if you had like set a ref or something, it will still be set, or set the state.
Set timeout that's just like running super quickly and it's updating some state. That state would change.
Or you had initialized state, right? Let's say you lazy initialize state. You know how you can like do that in use state? Mm-hmm. That wouldn't run again.
Correct.
So it's not remounting your component, it's simulating a remount.
Thanks for saying that. Because
that's the difference. And so they run the effect, but the effect is referencing the version of the component that was there when it simulated an unmount. Mm-hmm. So it's like breaking a ton of people's code, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, all the use effect with an empty dependency array.
Yeah.
Treating that as on mount, therefore this thing will only ever run once.
Right.
It's I want to say broken. It's not broken because React, I don't think ever like guaranteed that would work. Yeah. But it's your app is broken because you were probably thinking that it would only run that effect would only run once.
Right.
For most of our effects, if they're like no ops or idempotent, fine.
Yeah.
But if your effect is doing something like send a unmount, it's like pinging an analytics service. That's going to get 2 pings now. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot here, right? It's like, first of all,
we should talk about why they're doing this.
Yes. So, yes. Okay. So the reason they're doing this kind of goes back to my video. I'm definitely linked to it because that was my best attempt to explain and break down why all this is happening, basically. And it's all around concurrent mode, which is that.
I think this one has to do with like the double effect is off screen.
Yeah. I think if I were to explain it in a general way, it's that concurrent mode features like off screen or like transitions, they need to be able to run your app separately. It's a separate version of your app. And no?
Well, okay. So strict mode is basically going to guard you against concurrent mode. And it's all this stuff you're talking about, like running concurrent versions of your app, making sure you're not referencing refs and state during render because those things could change during concurrent render. But this double effect firing, effects won't run in the concurrent versions of the app. Effects run when the component gets mounted on screen. The reason for these double effects firing is there's going to be a new
effects don't run in a concurrent version of the app. It's like a server rendered version almost. Well, I guess that's effects run after commit, so that the component is on screen. Yes, the component is on screen. It's because it's like a side effect. Like it's a side effect of rendering. So if I'm going to update the title, I need to do it in a side effect because I might be. Oh, it makes sense.
I might be running a concurrent app off screen.
Okay, now coming back. Sorry, there's a lot of margaritas and mojitos the last 2 weeks.
But you're right about like this is the greater goal of strict mode is to prepare you for all of this stuff. And most of it has to do with concurrent mode. But this double effect firing is going to be about this off-screen API. And so to describe this, imagine you have like tabs. You have a UI and you're building tabs. And you're like, click tab 1 and that renders like tab 1 component. Click tab 2, that renders like profile component. As you click between these tabs, those components are going to become rendered and unrendered. So say you like go to the profile, you make some changes, and then you go to the next tab and you make some changes, and then you want to go back to the profile. Like any state that was stored with that profile component is gone because you've unrendered the component. And then maybe you want to like do all these tabs and then click a save button at the end. So like how do you solve this problem in React today?
Today you would use
like context or
store an external store.
Just like all the versions of context. Which is kind of crappy because React actually wants to own your state.
Sure. Life is easier when you keep state inside of React.
And
for so many reasons.
And also too, with concurrent mode, it actually wants to own your state because it can actually modify the state in the concurrent version of the app. And then come
prepare
back. So it wants to own your state. It just
re-render it. Sure.
You start doing it in global stores. You're kind of opting out of concurrent, some features of concurrent mode. So, there's going to be an off-screen API that basically, when you're going between these tabs, by the way, this is like none of this is today. It's just like theoretical. I don't know, theoretical is not the right word, but planned. If I'm on profile and I go to like settings and it's just a tab on one page, and I go back to profile, I want to be able to reuse the state from profile that I originally had. And so off screen is what lets you do that.
Okay, off screen. So
off screen, so you
can keep it rendered basically. Even though it's like not really so it's never really unmounted, but it's going to be unrendered in a sense.
Exactly.
Uncommitted from the browser.
Exactly. So it's not rendered, but you want it to remember all of its state, and you don't want to have to immediately reach for like these contexts.
That'd be awesome.
Or it gets
that'd be amazing. It'd be like if you were doing the feature in GitHub where you save a comment, to local state as you update your setting comment text, and then you want to go away but come back and restore it. I mean, if you could render that as
that's interesting.
The key for like the post ID or something.
So is that how? Like I was thinking, like how would you remember which issue is tied to it? Yeah, maybe key.
Be pretty amazing.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So anyway, your component is unrendered.
Right.
But you're remembering the state. So if that component was doing things like opening up WebSocket connections, you want to close those because it's not rendered.
Yeah.
So your effect is going to run its cleanup function. And then when you go back to the tab, you're going to re-render that component with its old state. So the effect is going to run its mount function again. So that's what this double effect rendering is trying to simulate. It's trying to simulate running the effect, running the cleanup, and then running the effect again with the modified state.
Oh, okay. All right. New stream mode, I'm just going to read from the docs. New stream mode behaviors and the feature we'd like to add, a feature that allows React to add and remove sections of the UI while preserving state. Oh, okay. I didn't realize what this was about. I knew this was one subset. I thought it was a general thing to make sure that your components are more resilient. But now I understand why it simulates and then it uses the previous state exactly for this reason. So the memory is the new thing that actually breaks like the current mental model of React. If you click away from a tab, you would expect the state to be reset. In fact, a lot of behavior it would be broken if that change were made. It's not that that's a feature of announcing a component. It's that the state is reset, and probably every React app relies on that either implicitly or explicitly.
Yes. But I will say this isn't just going to magically happen for all your
components. Right. No,
I think you have to wrap it in off screen.
For example, when user tabs away from the screen and back, React should be able to immediately show the previous screen. To do this, React would unmount. Right. So yeah, exactly. Components requires components to be resilient to effects. I'll just finish reading it. Immediately show the previous screen. To do this, React would unmount and remount trees using the same component state as before. This feature will give React apps better performance out of the box, but requires components to be resilient to effects being mounted and destroyed multiple times. Most effects will work without any changes, but some effects assume they are only mounted or destroyed once. To help surface these issues, React 18 introduces a new development-only check to strict mode. This new check will automatically unmount and remount every component whenever a component mounts for the first time, restoring the previous state on the second mount. Yeah, so sorry, when we just had a near explosion in one of our fluorescent light bulbs. If this was broken up a little bit, that's why. Picking back up where we left off, I had thought
just remounting the podcast.
And we're remounting the podcast
Simulating
the previous state.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That deserved more black from me, but that's all you're going to get today. I thought it was about generally making your components robust to just being like, but it actually makes sense. That's something I think I didn't fully click, is that your effects don't run until a tree is committed. But that makes a lot of sense. So in my video, I go through this whole explanation of how render is supposed to be pure, render is supposed to be idempotent, and the easiest way to think about use effect is that it lets you remove impurities from the render calculation. So any impurity that you have that would be unsafe to run a million times, you put it in a use effect. And so, of course, those aren't running during this end universe creation of your, creating end different versions of your apps. Because that's the whole point. They're supposed to mark the things that are not safe to be run over and over again. The mount and unmount and remount is for this feature. Okay, now it all makes sense.
But they do tie together.
Yes.
They do tie together
Yes.
because you want all your data in state.
Yeah.
So that it can be run with different end universes.
Yeah.
But there are certain UIs where you can't use React state because you need to persist that
So
data.
does it mean if you get an off screen? I didn't realize this. I explained the off screen thing about like preparing a screen literally off screen and then like swiping it on so it's like ready to go. You can animate it in, something like that, which you might be able to do. Because it's going to be like ready to go. You would have to like wait to render it or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is a lot clearer to me. It's a tabs component, and I
thought your video. I didn't
know that makes sense, but I didn't realize it applied so much. If you get this off screen, would you need an external store anymore? I mean, I guess, okay, a store could solve a single source of truth for multiple components. But if you're just using a store or a context in order to persist state for a single component, you don't need to do that anymore.
Right. And
which is a super badass
light bulb moment for me here. And again, I'm kind of like guessing.
Yeah.
Concurrent mode, you want to be able to transition to new states of your app, which means you need to render your profile component in different states in end universes.
Yeah.
And if you're forced, because you're building a tab UI, to use an external store,
right,
you can no longer do that.
Right. Because React doesn't know. Yeah, how can
React
you can't fork your store? I mean, unless there's a whatever.
Well, this is like there's like these like
it's hard.
These code sandboxes that Dan put together with like cache APIs,
right,
to do this, but
it'd be way easier to just use React state.
It's what you said. Those cache APIs are about synchronizing state across multiple components. That's not the problem we're dealing with.
Right.
We want a single component to own all of its state. We're just gonna tab away from that component.
Right.
We don't want to be forced to go.
You want to remember its last state.
Yeah,
you gotta have some memory.
Because it's not about
beyond its life cycle.
It's not about synchronizing the profile component with other components. It's just the profile component needs to own its state while it's rendered and unrendered.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
So because of all this,
so that's the motivation.
Yeah,
right.
Your effects will do the mount, the unmount, and then the mount again. And this bit me. This is what I wanted to talk about this on the podcast. It bit me, and when I realized it bit me, it actually made my code better. So I kind of want to tell this. So
do you hate when that happens?
Yeah. So I'm building like this like cross-page animation thing with Next. So I literally cross-page animations. It's mind-blowing.
Okay.
How cool it is with framer motion.
Nice.
Part of what you need to know is when you go back and forth between these pages, you need to know like where you were on the last page, where the item was, just so you can like smoothly, if you're going to go back, you need to like scroll to a certain position. You need to know like the X, Y, where you're coming from. There's like just a whole bunch of things that you run into. So I set up this component that basically logs the router's history, but I don't care about like the current history of the router. I just care about like the last page. So I just tap into like all the next routing states and I just keep track of them. It's like super, super simple. But it's like a stack and you can just kind of go through the stack and see all the pages you were on. So when I'm rendering my component, I need to set up the stack. So it's like an array with just one object. And so I just had to use effect, set up this data structure, and I did it on now. So just an empty dependency array, and I wasn't using like any dependencies. Like it could be an empty dependency. It's just an on mount setup.
This is the thing I wanted to make just as part of the story is that people sometimes like abuse the empty dependency array, get something to run once. Just as an aside, whenever we code in React, we always use the ESLint rule. And if there's a missing dependency that it tells us should be added, we add it and figure out how to make the effect resilient to it. So you're already kind of approaching it kind of like that, but there was still this issue. So, okay.
So,
it was empty, and it wasn't empty because you were violating the ESLint rule. It was empty because there was no dependency.
There was no dependency. I'm just setting up some state and
kind of ref or something like that.
Yeah, I think I maybe ended up like adding a few dependencies and had them in there, but I'm just trying to the point, right? So anyway, it's like the stack data structure. When it initializes and these conditions are met, I have an effect that just kind of seeds it with its initial value. And you could like do this as a state initializer, but I had to make sure like the router was ready. I actually needed an effect for this. I don't want to complicate it. So anyway, I run this and my stack has 2 items in it. And I'm like, why does my stack have 2 items in it? And it's because that effect was running twice. I was just like looking at the empty dependency arrays, like this is an on mount thing, but it was actually running twice during that. So made me realize it's actually kind of crappy to just like use an empty dependency array to signal or whatever the dependencies were in there is just like a proxy for this is initialization code. Because my effect was double running, I realized like there's actually more logic here that I want to capture in code where it's like if I have an empty stack and these conditions are met, seed the stack, like push this item onto the stack.
It actually doesn't have to do with like mounting and unmounting.
Oh, interesting. It has to do with if my stack is empty and these conditions are met.
So I actually think about initialization logic as being tied to mounting, but it's not.
Bingo.
That's crazy.
So I added an if statement that said, okay, if my stack is empty and, the rest of the crap, push on this initial item. And I walked away from this. I was like, wow, that actually improved my code, because it's exactly what you just said. I was just using initialization as a proxy. But that's not the real logic. The real logic was if all these conditions are met.
It's like you had a class and you used a constructor to create some stuff, but then you refactor to say like, get users, and like your get users getter function first checks like if I don't have an underscore users, fetch it, otherwise return it. You're thinking about it differently. It's not about constructing the object. It's about like when I need the users, I check if I have them, and if not, do the expect. It's like memoizing almost. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that idea. But well, that's why I like when hooks were first announced, like 4 years ago, right? Old.
Yeah, sure.
Old. They talked about writing an effect with no dependency array first, and conceptually, your effect should be able to run on every render.
Yeah.
They talked about that, and then you only didn't do that like for performance reasons, but from a mental model, the mental model of an effect is that it should run every time the component is rendered. Yeah. So it's almost like we would have been better off if we never had dependency arrays, because then you would be guarding your thing and thinking about how it runs when it changes. Because it's not about mounting or not. Right. You would have already had that guard because this thing would have been firing all the time.
Right.
And you would have been able to encode the logic, which is what the effect actually is, which is if I don't have an array for my stack, create it.
Right. You can think about this with like the WebSocket connections or analytics services.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not,
exactly. You're going to
do this on mount. If I'm not connected to the WebSocket.
Exactly. And of course, maybe it's a practical thing where like you just don't want to run this code every time the page ID changes, and that way you don't have to think about it. But what if you had to run the effect every time the component rendered and you had no control over that? You might have to encode more logic into your effect. Let's say, how often do you want to track this page? If it's first rendered, like the first time the user visits it, have we tracked it yet in this stack of the history for this entry in the history? So that's what you do. Have we done it for that? But if you go to this page, then back to this page, you want to retrack it again. Or maybe you want to track it if it's been a certain amount of seconds. So you're coding more of the domain logic into the effect, as opposed to relying on like rendering
dependency arrays
and dependency arrays to guide your logic. So it's kind of interesting.
I'm not gonna lie, I agree with this. I just to take the other side, there's a few cases that just when you put that responsibility on the developer, it's like, so like imagine your ID changing.
Yeah.
You're now having to like use previous ID. So there's some nice things where it's like, oh, when my ID changes,
you would need like a map that says I've already logged for this ID,
or just like the last ID was 1, the new ID is 2, therefore I need to like refetch the data.
Right.
And then also do like the React removing time from your mental model makes things so much easier. So that if you're forced to introduce that,
if you're comparing previous with next, or current, it's pretty tough.
But I think,
but it's nice to think about this. Yes. It does seem like it's the right mental model.
And absolutely don't use empty dependency array
when you have dependencies
to say on now.
Right.
Just don't like. First of all, that won't even work in strict mode because that's going to fire twice.
Yeah.
But just even more, just to drive this point home is, it's not unmount. It's something. There's another condition that usually relates to your component state. Yeah.
Do I have WebSocket open? Have I initialized this stack?
Yep.
What else do we do in map? Fetching data, if SWR is fetching data. And a lot of those things probably...
Yeah, fetch requests.
Fetch requests is already going out, so you'd want some memory there. I'm sure like the data fetching libraries will work, or probably already do work with that kind of thing. Like when you fetch API users 1, 2, 3, and then another component were to fetch it, I think libraries like SWR and React Query already like dedupe that, and
it's already going.
It's already going in flight. And if it's already populating cache, we'll just return it, maybe refresh it. So that's kind of cool. That's like the idea. It's like thinking about, that's an example of a hook that's like resilient to like n-re renders or like an immediate unmount and remount. So
Very cool.
Pretty neat, man. That's cool stuff.
Yeah.
That was good. That helped me. I like that. That was a good conversation because that helped me. That drove home the point about that.
Off-screen stuff, and then more state, more concurrent mode, more transitions.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
It is awesome.
Future React is bright.
It is bright. It's really cool. I'm glad we'll be able to keep more state in React. If this is a change that leads to using fewer external stores and fewer homegrown caches and more React state, that's a win in my book.
Yeah,
I go as far as I can with React state.
Yeah, and again, I keep repeating this, but with concurrent mode, I think React controls your state, so it can render your app with different.
It can change your state, and
exactly.
So you render your app, and it's a pure calculation. It can find it, and it can be thrown away before you commit it, or it can be committed immediately.
Where if you're using like module scope, you can't do that.
You can't. Yeah.
So, and then there's everything in between those two. If you think about like the middle, that's the things like, I don't know, like external stores, context, and all that stuff. And I think React will have some answers for those items with concurrent mode. But you can see how the more state that React owns, there's some more things it can do with the end universes, the Offscreen APIs.
Right. Plus the assumptions about render being pure and all that.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
Yeah.
So React is so cool, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Cool. Awesome. I think that's probably a good spot to wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay.
That was fun. I didn't realize we'd be able to talk about strict mode for that long, but it was interesting seeing people on Twitter talk about it. And, I think it was tough for a lot of people because they wanted to upgrade and it was kind of weird. I don't have experience yet, having a big app and trying to add it. I guess you could scope strict mode to different parts and try to start refactoring it.
Oh, that's a good point. I never
strict mode is a component.
Yeah, componentry.
So if all of your crap starts breaking, that's a lot to do. If you were any of the apps the big apps we worked on, if we were upgrading it and everything broke, we wouldn't just stop the world and do that. So probably do one at a time. Also, if your app is not broken, strict mode breaking your app doesn't mean your app is broken at all. There's no observable bugs in your app. Also, just because you upgrade to React 18 doesn't mean you're starting to use concurrent features. So React 18 is not doing anything different to your app that's going to affect how it renders compared to React 17. It's only if you start using concurrent features. That was their whole thing. They changed it from your app is now in concurrent mode to you now use concurrent features. So if you started using suspense or transitions or off-screen, this theoretical off-screen thing that doesn't exist yet, then you would want to run that subtree of your app against strict mode and make sure it works.
Yeah.
But if you upgrade to 18 because you want to stay on top of the upgrade path, but your strict mode doesn't work, you can still do that, and you can start adding strict mode piece by piece to your app. So
what about
it's not going to change the behavior though. So people are thinking that their app is broken in React 18 because strict mode is showing bugs, but first of all, it doesn't happen in production, and second of all, you're not using any concurrent features. Strict mode, again, is designed to surface bugs related to concurrency, to concurrent mode features. And so if you can use React 18 without using any concurrent mode features, and so that's fine.
I like that. What about I start using a bunch of libraries and those libraries start opting into concurrent mode features?
I think they're going to have to be explicit about that the way SWR says suspend is true, because it's a big change. How do you know, if I was making a library that, you're saying library authors are going to want to be able to freely use React 18 features?
I'm an Next.js user, and I can imagine a world where the next router just uses transitions by default.
And it's an implementation detail, and it means your app code now has to be resilient to concur. That is interesting. What does it mean to say my app is compatible with React 18? Because you can have an app that works on React 18. There was basically no breaking changes to React 18. But does it really work on React 18 if you have code that's not concurrent safe?
Well, I think the answer to this is if libraries start introducing concurrent features as implementation details, then no, it doesn't. But if concurrent mode is all opt-in,
right? I think it'd be good to people who are upgrading, just the same way we think it's good to keep apps upgraded, to make your app code work with strict mode, and to learn how to update your effects to make them more resilient. For the simulated unmount and simulated remount. But I think it's going to take a long time for that stuff to get to the ecosystem anyway. So, and an off-screen component doesn't exist yet. So it's more like, if that's what this is for, I know your app could break in strict mode because of this thing, but it could still work with suspense and transitions fine. Who knows?
And also, like you said, it still works in production because
Exactly.
I think strict mode is more.
No, it works in production with suspense and transitions because those don't have bugs related to this issue. So if you, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had a violation of strict mode, a bug due to strict mode, and you were using off-screen, then you would have a problem in production because off-screen would cause a problem.
Okay, I didn't really think of that. So strict mode is like it's helping you
avoid
with
production bugs.
But it's helping you with suspense and transitions by running your render function twice. But those things exist today.
Yeah, and I don't know if they would actually have. I don't know if that is a bug related to. I don't know if there would ever be a bug. Maybe there would. So maybe.
Dude, there's. I mean, you can go on Reddit. There's people that are doing document title during in render, like and not in effect. Like,
and if you did that, so that's yes. Mm-hmm. So strict mode renders your component twice, right?
Yes, renders your component twice. That's why if you do a console log render, you get one that's like normal.
That's pretty gnarly, but it is pretty cool. That I'm guessing is that's the thing that's gonna. But that already was true in React.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, wait, hold on. The point I'm trying to make is strict mode is doing things that exist today.
Yeah.
Like it is rendering your component twice to protect you for concurrent mode.
Yeah.
Right? But it's also doing things that don't exist today.
Yes.
Like running your effects twice.
Right.
Simulating is better. I say running.
Running.
That doesn't actually exist. There's no way
that could cause an actual bug in production because there's no concurrent mode feature that will reproduce that behavior. Correct.
So it's just interesting.
Yes.
It's just interesting.
Preparing you for it. It's
one is like preparing you for things that do exist today. The other is preparing you. It's almost like I'm gonna interject some opinion, but last thing I'll say is that if you are interested in you think you have a bunch of effects in your app and you're like, holy crap, I'm just going to get run over by this strict mode. I think it'd be really good to if you have effects that you only want to run on mount, create a use mount hook and do that. And then I use
ref or something.
Exactly. I use ref. Can
literally only run one time.
Yeah.
And it's easier than saying maybe it's just a proxy for saying, do we have a WebSocket connection? Has the stack been? It's just we're going to run this once.
Right. Also, too, it's more the whole thing, from effect dependencies to strict mode double render. In fact, all this is just being more explicit in your code is what it's trying to get you to do.
Right.
So there's nothing more explicit
than I use unmount, right? Because an effect with an empty dependency is always an approximation of an unmount. They said it's a good analogy, but it's not actually what's happening. And now we know that's why.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. Yeah. I agree. Use unmount. You should be able to use that basically everywhere if you really wanted to guard against the double effects. So yeah.
So and also there's just other things too. You want to fire an effect when just one prop changes, but you want to observe a whole bunch of other props in there. You can just say use depends on something like that. Just write
right. Be very explicit.
Yeah. Even if these things they have bugs because they could be referencing state. Yeah. It's fine. Just be explicit. Don't let the empty dependency array be a proxy for on.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. Good stuff, man. Do you have a video on that or a tweet or something? You should tweet about that because I'd like to reference that. Really.
Okay.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Let's draft one.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. All right. Hey, let's wrap this up. I think everyone's tired of hearing our voices, and I want to turn these lights off before they light our studio on fire. So,
I'm more worried about inhaling the gas.
Okay. I'm not going to make any jokes about that one. Thanks to everyone for listening. I'm Sam, by the way.
I'm Ryan.
We will see y'all next week. All right. Bye-bye.
See ya.